Welcome back to Get Nerdy MTG. As always, I am the Possum. Some people call me Rick. I'll answer to either one. But today we have a deck tech for you. Now, pretty much anybody that knows me and knows I play Magic knows I draft literally every chance I get. A lot of those same people can also tell you that I'm kind of hit or miss on whether or not I build anything viable at said draft. Here lately, it's been definitely more on the miss side. However, I recently managed to draft for the Kamigawa Neon Dynasty set, the archetype green-white modified, and surprisingly enough, went undefeated that night. Before we get into the deck, we'll go through a few stats on it. Obviously, draft is a 40 card minimum. I frequently will end up playing 41. However, this time I did stay with the 40 card minimum. I have 15 modifier cards. These are cards that modify a creature. Modified being the mechanic that is equipments, auras I control, or counters are considered modifications. So any creatures that have those will be considered modified. But as I was saying, I have 15 modifying cards in the deck, 7 of which of those are creatures. 3 modify payoffs, so cards that I gain something by having a modified creature. Some of those are creatures as well. I have 6 sources of removal, 11 creatures or creature creating sources, and the land base I went through was just 16 lands. I normally will run 17. 16 seemed to work pretty well in this case though. So getting into the deck, my pack one, pick one, which is what made me want to build modified, having green in it specifically, was the Kodama of the West Tree. For 2 and a green, I get a 3/3 creature with reach. Modified creatures I control have trample. Whenever a modified creature I control deals combat damage to a player, I search my library for a basic land, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So this is not only a modified payoff, but one of the payoffs it gives me is pulling extra lands out of my deck onto the battlefield. So it's a little bit of ramp, a little bit of deck filtering. I had the Heir of the Ancient Fang. I actually had 2 copies of it. For 2 and a green, it's a 2/3 creature that enters the battlefield with a 1/1 counter on it if I control a modified creature. I said I had 2 copies of it. Also had 2 copies of the Jukai Preserver. Probably pronouncing that wrong, but for 3 and a green, I get a 3/3 creature that when it enters the battlefield, I can put a 1/1 counter on a creature I control. I can do that on the Preserver or another one. So this is one of the modifiers that happens to be a creature. It also has the channel ability, which I don't think I ever channeled at any point during that event. But in the case of this one, for 2 and a green, I can discard the Preserver and put a 1/1 counter on each of up to 2 creatures I control. Actually, I may have done that once. We have the Iron Apprentice. For 1 generic, it's a 0/0, but it enters with a +1/+1 counter on it. And when it dies, it can move that counter to another creature I control. Ghost Shintai of Boundless Vigor. 1 and a green for a 1/1 with trample. Beginning of my end step, I can pay 1. If I do, put a 1/1 counter on target shrine for each shrine I control. This would have been a much better card in the deck if I had multiple shrines. But basically for 1 mana, I could put a 1/1 counter on this creature during my end step. Fang of Shigeki. It's a 1 green for a 1/1 with Death Touch. I believe in my stats I counted this as removal. It's also a little bit of security. Opponents don't really want to tack in with their creature that is actually going to be relevant if you've got a Death Touch creature that you really don't mind losing. Kappa Tech Wrecker for 1 and a green. It's a 1/3 with ninjutsu, which I think I may have ninjutsu'd it once in the tournament. But it's ninjutsu for also 1 and a green. Enters the battlefield with a Death Touch counter on it. When it deals combat damage to a player, I can remove the Death Touch counter, and if I do, exile artifact or enchantment that player controls. So it's a modifier as well as a removal. Historian's Wisdom. It's an enchantment, specifically an aura for 2 and a green. Enchant artifact or creature. When it enters the battlefield, if enchanted permanent is creature with the greatest power among creatures on the battlefield, I draw a card. So it could be a little bit of card draw. Other than that, it's just a modifier that gives one of my creatures +2/+1. With this, it's more about the fact that it modifies a creature for my other payoffs. Roaring Earth. This was actually one of the best cards in the deck, or at least it performed the best, but it's an enchantment for 1 and a green. When a land enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on a creature or vehicle I control. I know that I never used the channel ability for this one, for X and green. Discard Roaring Earth, which is how the channel ability works. But in this case, I would put an X number of 1/1 counters on a land I control. It becomes a 0/0 green spirit creature with haste, but still a land. Like I said, I never did that one. One of my opponents actually drafted 2 or 3 of these, which could get absolutely insane. Careful Cultivation. It's another enchantment aura. 2 and a green. Enchanted permanent. If enchanted permanent is a creature, it gets +1/+3, has reach, and can tap for 2 mana. Or I can channel this one for 1 and a green to create a 1/1 green human monk. Basically, it creates a 1/1 mana dork. I never channeled it either, though. Had 2 copies of that. Light the Way for a white. I can either put a 1/1 counter on a creature or vehicle and untap it, so it's a good combat trick, or return a target permanent I control to my hand. It could be a little bit of protection. If something of mine is about to die, I can put it back in my hand where it's safe. I don't believe I ever did that ability. There's a few times it could have come in handy. One of my opponents would put an enchantment on a creature of mine that did not allow it to attack or block. So I could have returned that creature to hand and then replayed it. But I did use it as a modifier multiple times. Regent's Authority for a white. Target creature gets +2/+2 till end of turn. But if it's an enchantment creature or a legendary creature, put a 1/1 counter on it, and it gets 1/1 until end of turn as well. Every time I used this card, I did do it on an enchantment creature. So it modified it, plus gave it the extra little boost temporarily. Story Weave for 2 and a green. I get to either put 2 1/1 counters on a creature I control, or 2 lore counters on a saga I control. And the next time one or more enchantment creatures enters the battlefield under my control this turn, it enters with 2 additional 1/1 counters. I actually don't remember seeing the last part of the second option. I know I never used it on an enchant on a saga, but I did use it a few times with boosting up and modifying one of my creatures. I think this may have been the only saga I ran. No, it is not. This saga is Tales of Master Sesshiru. Again, I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. But for 4 and a green, it's a saga. So it enters the battlefield, I put a lore counter on it, and then after my draw step, I advance to the next chapter of the saga. Chapters 1 and 2, I put a 1/1 counter on a creature or vehicle. It gains vigilance till end of turn. And then chapter 3, this saga will be exiled, so it'll leave the battlefield and then come back as a vigilance haste creature. That's also a 5/5. We have the instant Master's Rebuke for 1 and a green. Target creature I control deals damage equal to its power to target creature or planeswalker I don't control. So this was removal. It's actually very handy if you have a creature with Death Touch, because then even though it only deals 1 damage, the creature it deals that to dies. Ninja's Kunai. It's equipment for 1 mana. Equipped creature has pay 1, tap, and sacrifice the kunai. It deals 3 damage to any target. So it's removal for small creatures, and an equip cost of 1. So for 1 mana, I have to put it onto the board. For another mana, I can put it onto a creature. And then for 1 mana, I can actually tap, sacrifice, or tap the creature, sacrifice the kunai, and deal 3 damage. So it's removal, but it's very telegraphed removal. Wanderer's Intervention for 1 and a white, 4 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. Doesn't seem that great, but it actually did prove relevant several times. Banishing Slash for 2 white, destroy up to 1 artifact, enchantment, or tapped creature. If I control an artifact and an enchantment, I get a 2/2 white samurai with vigilance. I never got the second part of this card. However, the destroy a tapped creature also proved relevant quite a few times. Oh, missed one. We have our other saga that I played for 1 and a white. Chapter 1, Scry 2, which is better than a lot of people would realize. Chapter 2 was Gain 2 Life, which wasn't hugely relevant, but it did buy me a little bit of time. And Chapter 3, Exile it, return it as a 2/2 with First Strike. That is actually an enchantment creature. The enchantment creature, I did get payoffs for some of the other cards I used by having an enchantment creature. And I had 2 copies of Tamio's Safekeeping. 1 green, permanent I control gets hexproof and indestructible till end of turn, and I gain 2 life. So I was able to save something of mine. I could cast this after I've blocked with a Death Touch creature, so my Death Touch creature would survive. It also comes in handy if my opponent is trying to kill something of mine. The gain 2 life, that's just kind of an extra added little bonus. In limited, 2 life sometimes does prove relevant. I don't remember offhand if it really did a whole lot in the case where I used it, but being able to save a permanent I controlled can definitely be very, very beneficial to me. But that's the deck I played. Again, it's when you build a deck, you build what you like, what you would enjoy playing. Fortunately, what I built this time actually did prove effective, which is nice. Like I said, it's good to get a win every now and then. But in any case, just don't forget, if you're not subscribed to the video or to the channel, please do that. It helps out hugely. We are still slowly growing in subscribers. Also, even if whether you're subscribed or not, you can feel free to like and share the video. That helps get the word out about Getting Nerdy as well, so we can get a little bit more traffic up. And in any case, I'll talk to you guys later. Have a good day.